We're proud to welcome you to the Exceptional Advisor podcast series brought to you by the Investments and Wealth Institute. This series aims to help you to better serve your clients, differentiate yourself from the competition, and enhance your ability to communicate those differences. Hi, I'm your host, Bob Powell. Today's guest is George McReynolds. He's a certified financial planner practitioner, certified financial fiduciary, and registered financial consultant, and author of the personal finance book, Prosperity by Design. George is also a decorated veteran of the U.S. Army and served on the security detail for the Supreme Allied Commander at NATO headquarters in Belgium. After leaving the military, he served as a paramedic, police officer, and on a police SWAT team. Welcome to the podcast, George.
All right, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Before we get going, for the benefit of our listeners who may not be familiar with you and your work, do you mind giving us a brief overview?
Sure. I'm a certified financial planner with an independent broker-dealer channel, primarily fee-based. I have just a few old, we call them legacy clients, the ones that started out, helped me make me who I was. And so I didn't want to get rid of them. So I do keep the FINRA licenses just for that, but we don't bring in any new commission clients. And primarily work with fee-based and on a fidelity platform for the most part, NFS. My broker-dealer is Cambridge, and they're also the registered investment advisor. I've been licensed in security since 1996, and I was in banking until 94, and I came across Harry Dent and found out why I was so successful selling debt. And I saw that there was going to be 100 million people looking to get out of debt. So I went back to school and got my CFP and graduated in 96 and went to work with Legg Mason. And I was with them for a while, a great company. I love the people I worked with in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. And but I needed to specialize a little more. It was an area called Bryn Mawr, main line. That's kind of not, I'm not a Bryn Mawr kind of guy. So I did some research on in the county I live in, Montgomery County, and I found out that the biggest employer is Merck & Company. And right now there are 15,000 Merck & Company employees within a mile of my office. So that was my core specialty when I left Legg Mason.
Right. So you've made a practice, a habit out of specializing in certain industries and certain occupations. Do you want to talk first about specializing in the world of pharmaceuticals then,
Sure,
given that you just mentioned it?
Yeah, that was kind of an intentional thing. I did the research. Everyone either worked for Merck or they worked for a company that supplied Merck. And like I said, they were the biggest employer in the county. And so I actually went to work inside their credit union for 4 years. I got to know the union people, the HR people. It was through a credit union, but I didn't realize what a bank program was, how you get the tellers to refer the people over with big CDs. I started it as a financial planning practice. So I went right to the HR people and the union reps and did a lot of seminars and never developed the tellers. And when I was at Legg Mason, I did 6 financial plans in 6 months, and that put me in the top 1% of 1,000 advisors. And in my first year working at Merck's credit union, I did 750 financial plans.
Wow.
So it was just massive experience sitting down with people, getting them to give the information and doing a financial plan focused financial plan to get them to give me the information and not just come in to buy an investment. And then I went independent in 2001, and that coincided with the publishing of my book, Prosperity by Design. That was my first book. And that was briefly a bestseller in 2001 for all of like 3 or 4 weeks around Christmas time. But it really helped me bring up the practice as I went independent, and things just exploded. I had 300 clients, 300 families, and I always had a list of 75 to 85 that wanted to come on board, and I just couldn't do the onboarding. So eventually we had to stop taking new clients for a couple of years. But a lot of it was the popularity of the book, and we were 100% by referral only, and again, really specializes in the Merck people. And then as people changed companies, they go to Johnson & Johnson or from Johnson & Johnson. or some of the other chemical companies. We have what's called the 202 High-Tech Corridor, which runs from Delaware up through New York. It covers the University of Delaware, a number of the Philadelphia colleges up through Princeton and Rahway and all the way up through New Jersey. And it's all chemical companies and high-tech pharmaceutical companies. So there's a lot of movement between the companies. So I'd have one client at one place, and then they'd go to another. So they'd go from Merck to Sanofi of Venice, or to Johnson and Johnson, and it just kept growing from there. I developed that specialty in the industry. Now, what I did when I set out to develop it as a niche, I tried to figure out what are the special needs of these people. And I'd done some research. Forbes had said they were one of the top 100 employers in the country, and Forbes said that they had every conceivable benefit known to mankind. So I knew that they would need a lot of help with employee benefits. Their open enrollment was November, so I really focused on what they were. I'd make a contact. I'd ask them to give me things like the summary plan description, which nobody else read, and got good at that. They had stock options, but they were non-qualified stock options. And a lot of the so-called experts were out there talking about incentive stock options, and it really confused these people. So I went away to a school down south and became an expert in all employee stock options and bought the software. And I started giving the advice on that, and for not just Merck, but for a number of the other companies. And then one of the big decisions they make is, and a lot of times when they're changing directions or they're doing an acquisition, they have a package for early retirement. So typically they would add 5 years to the age and 5 years to the service. And they had a lump sum pension option at the time. So they could take the single life or joint life annuity, or they could take the lump sum payout. And I helped them with a lot of the calculations, which one to take. And then I also based, on as interest rates were changing, moving over to GAT, I could figure out some things. If interest rates are going to change, how much is going to affect their pension. And with the union people, they got a free peek in November. They could get the new rate or the old rate, and I could do the calculations for them to figure out which one was going to be better, whether they did December 1st or January 1st for the retirement. And there were also different 401k participation, where there were, I think, 4 unions at the time, and some would have 100% match, some would have 50% match, up to different levels. Then there was the management, the confidential. There are 9 different pension groups in the company as well. And if you change from one division to another, that changed all of your pension calc. So I kept current on all of those. And then when they were actually retiring, I would go to their retirement meetings with them and help them understand what their life insurance choices were, a number of other things. And the human resources people really helped, really appreciated that. So whenever they had someone show up without representation or an advisor, they'd say, hey, you need to call George and reschedule. And I'd meet with them and go over and explain everything that the human resources people would do. But also I could say, this is what you should do, rather than just lay out the fact for them. And so that's pretty much my story. Although they don't have the lump sum now for newer employees. They're moving to a cash balance plan, but it's still a big transition. So some people were in the old plan and they want to know, if they want to get out, should they get the new one or the old one, and how to time that. And also, as interest rates change, I help them figure out what that's going to do to their lump sum.
Our audience are largely investment professionals, investment advisors. And it sounds like your advice to those folks who might want to specialize in an industry like pharmaceuticals is to sort of become as expert as possible in all things employee benefits, whether it's their health insurance, their life insurance plan, their disability plan, their 401k, their stock option plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds like you became all things Merck, employee benefits.
I really focused on where did they need help. I noticed that a lot of people were making mistakes with the disability insurance. And I never sold disability insurance. And if I was accused of selling life insurance, there would not be enough evidence to convict me. But I still knew what their options were and helped walk them through it. There's a book by Steve Moeller. He was an associate or friend of Nick Murray, and he wrote a book which really helped me get on track. And it was, first you design the perfect life, and then you figure out what's the perfect business that supports that, and then who are the perfect clients. And that's kind of what kind of drove me. And then you find out what's important to the client. And then I jumped in with both feet and met with as many people as I possibly could. And there were a lot of no sales in there. There were a lot of, zero pays out of all those financial plans. But I just got an unprecedented experience working with Merck employees. And again, it filtered then into the other companies. Wyeth Labs was nearby as well. So someone was changing from one company to the other, says, what are you getting? What are you giving up? And then that kind of helps me now when I work a lot with first responders. So we may have a detective from Philadelphia who wants to go to work for the state attorney general's office as an investigator. And I can say, look, this is going to be the difference. This is what you're getting. This is what you're giving up.
Mm. So what advice might you have for the investment advisors who are listening who want to specialize in a particular industry like pharmaceuticals or electronics, or name the industry? Is there some common thread of advice that would be helpful?
Yeah, find out what kind of people you like to work with and what people are nearby, because you need a certain critical mass of them. Like you said, there's 15,000 Merck employees within 1 mile of my office. So that was enough to support me, and whatever that is. So if it's if there's a tire factory near you, or I have a friend in Ohio that works with Procter and Gamble. So it's, what kind of people do you want to work with? Do you want to work with the executives, the directors, managers, or do you get along with like the union people? Don't try to be everything to everybody. And then one thing I remember from Steve Moeller's book was, when you do that, when you get into the niche, you create a buzz. So I had a guy that was leaving one of the chemical companies, and he was going over to another chemical company. And so he asked people at the old company, what should he do in terms of his retirement stuff? And he got 3 names of people. Then he talked to the new company, which was McNeil Pharmaceutical, and he said, okay, what should I do with my retirement stuff when I move over? And they gave him 3 names. And then he asked one of his neighbors, and his neighbor only gave him my name, but he got my name 3 times from 3 different sources. And that's exactly what Steve Moeller was talking about, is creating a buzz. And when you have a buzz, people they feel like they're stupid for not working with you. So you get that first call. So there's part of the importance of working with a niche. It's got to be big enough, but it also has to be small enough that you can really create that buzz. So that's
right.
That's how I did it.
So, okay. So what I find interesting about your career is that you've developed not only a niche in the pharmaceutical industry, but you just a second ago mentioned first responders, police. When we chatted earlier, you mentioned FBI. I'm curious how you made the transition or added to the pharmaceutical expertise in a whole nother occupation.
Yeah, it actually started out earlier than that. Before I went into banking, I spent 10 years as a first responder. I was an MP, I was an emergency medical technician, and then paramedic. I was on a police SWAT team. And so 10 years, and I got banged up, beat down, and burned out. And it's just kind of miraculous how I transitioned into banking. It was just so far-fetched, the idea. But I ended up in banking, and I was very successful. But there's 100 million people in this country looking to get into debt. It's like selling sex on a troop train. It was easy. So I just got up every morning, went to work, showed up, and never lied to anyone, and I was really successful. But a lot of my friends from police work, from emergency medicine, from fire, it's almost like a social class. of people. So the cops and the firemen like to hang around together, not with each other. So the cops don't hang with firemen, but because my brother-in-law was a fire marshal, and I got along with both groups as well as the EMS. So they would ask me questions, and I came to realize just how different they were from other retirees, because they do retire earlier. You know, you could go 25 and age 50, and you really have to do that because, like, I got banged up pretty hard in 10 years. 25 car accidents and 200 street fights. Some of these guys, I don't know how they did it. I would go to the retirees picnics, and these guys were beat. It was really sad to see how they sacrificed their health. So they could retire at age 50, but they had shorter lifespans, and they had some other decision to make. When I was there, they didn't have the drop. But the drop program now allows them to, when they're retirement eligible, they can put what would be their pension into a retirement account. And then when they leave in 3, 4, 5 years, they can have anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000. And I know of one chief who actually retired with over $1 million in his drop plan. And then he went to work for another agency, worked 5 years and got another pension vested. But also they stopped putting into the pension, which is another 6% that allows them to build up a side fund. And then, but then they have entire retiree health and stuff. But one of the biggest things is, even if they work after, or if they work before or during and pay into Social Security, they lose up to 60% of the benefits because of what's called the windfall elimination provision. And I got on that real early and figured it out. It was harder to get information then, but I would meet with guys that say, look, you know, you're not going to get your full Social Security. They could get the SSA report. And I say, but you know what, Tom, you're going to get about $500 a month. Tom would go to all these workshops everywhere, and even met with Social Security. Said, no, you're going to get this, you're going to get this, you're going to get this. I said, Tom, you're going to get about $500. And so he finally got down to the Social Security people called back and says, oh, no, you don't qualify for that. You're getting $496 a month. Most people don't even realize, because they don't pay, many of them, at least in Pennsylvania, don't pay into the Social Security system, kind of like the railroad workers paying into railroad retirement. But I learned how to do the calculations, and I was able to tell them where nobody else could tell them. Now, it's not the most lucrative group to work with. I generally work with managers and executives. So generally police lieutenant, captain, chiefs, inspectors, and investigators as well. And so they have a little more resources from that, but they also tend to have more of an abundance mentality. So, you know, when I was a regular street cop, I was suspicious of everyone, and life was about survival and scarcity, and that doesn't get you wealthy. And so those guys, like myself, are a little harder to work with than a guy that's, you know, been, and I do work with a lot of patrolmen, but they're on special task force. So they're working with the feds, or they're working with the county or some narcotics teams, but they've gone beyond just pushing a car around on the midnight show. And then that led to, they would meet with some of these feds. So I'm suddenly working with some Department of Homeland Security people, some FBI agents. Again, you tell them right up front, they really appreciate that. They don't want things sugar-coated, but give it to them direct, and your reputation gets around. They talk amongst each other because other people, they don't think understand them. And that's the same thing that happens with medical professionals. Doctors like to talk to other doctors. They don't like to talk to drug reps, but they like to talk to other doctors. It's the same microcosm.
Mm. So it seems like, on the one hand, that you were able to, both in the case of the pharmaceutical industry and in the case of police, fire, first responders, Homeland Security, you were one of them before you advised them, right? I mean, there's a certain level of probably camaraderie or trust because of those, because of what you invested in before you actually started advising them.
Yeah, it helped. It really helped that I had close relationships with a lot of guys. You know, at first when I left after 10 years, people think, you know, why did you leave? You know, are you, you know, a burnout, or are you, you know, were you corrupt, or things like, honest to God, people were thinking, you know, we're thinking those kinds of things. So, but just kind of showing my lifestyle. And again, because I was close, these guys knew me, where strangers didn't. So if I just, if I met some lieutenant from Connecticut, it wasn't buying me any points, the fact that I had that background. Now, had I been there for 20 years or 25, it would have made a difference. But it was that personal reputation and then exuding the confidence in giving them the right answer that really caught on. But then it was the personal referrals. So one detective, she was all over the place. She's with the Fed, she's with the state, she's with, just all over the place. And in a stakeout, they're talking, what are you going to do when you retire? Who are you talking to? And so she's probably referred 20 different law enforcement people to me from all different kinds of agencies.
Yeah.
But it's that personal connection that did it. If I just went out and say, hey, cops, call me, or hey, firemen, call me, I don't think I'd get anywhere.
Yeah. So you've already hinted at some of the similarities and differences between pharmaceutical and police, public service. Could you maybe just elaborate a little bit on some of those similarities and differences? Between say the pharmaceutical industry and the public employees.
Well, it's not so much the similarities as the differences and finding out what they were. But it's that difference that makes the difference. It's knowing, that cops aren't going to, most cops aren't going to get their full Social Security benefit, where if they sit down with someone else that's just going to sell them an annuity, where the focus is on the product, they're just going to assume that their Social Security is the same. They're going to assume that they can't touch their retirement account until they're over 59 and a half or at least 55. Well, cops and firemen can get their retirement plans at age 50, right, since 2015. So there's that broad knowledge, but it's just identifying the differences that makes a difference. And you don't have to become an expert in that. Just the fact that I knew that it was there, and I could pause and then research it more. And then as I got more and more experience, I got into some of the finer details. But it was just knowing that difference existed that really made a difference in getting into that niche. That Merck dividends were different than Wyeth and Company, or I'm sorry, Merck stock options were different than the stock options at Johnson & Johnson and Wyeth Labs.
Yeah. As you're talking, George, I'm thinking that some advisors take all comers from all industries and all professions and have to become expert in that one thing and may not be able to leverage it. As you think about the advice that you would give a young advisor who might be just starting out, would it be to develop a niche in a particular occupation or industry, or be
exactly, or even a recreational thing, whether it's golf? I worked with a guy at Lake Mason, and he was the best golfer in one of the best country clubs in the country. And every golfer wanted to go out for him. So he put him in the Lake Mason Value Trust and off to the golf course. And that was it. It wasn't so much about, he let Bill Miller take care of the investment decisions. He just talked golf. And there's some guys that do that with boating or fishing, whether it's fly fishing or deep sea. So it's what is interesting to you, and can you get enough other people that are interested in that same subject? Mm. And again, you want to be able to enjoy working with these people.
Right.
So I don't work with attorneys.
Well, you don't have to explain why or why not. So a second ago, you mentioned doctors. I know that's the third area in which you've specialized. Talk a little bit about how you got started specializing with doctors and sort of your experience with them.
Well, when I was a lender, I stumbled upon a refinance for a doctor, and he was kind of the social director between two hospitals that were right next to each other. And apparently he had lunch with everybody. But I did a really good job for him. He referred the people that worked for him to me. And then he'd go have lunch and talk to the other doctors. And then they were all calling me. And he would just say, wow, I'd call him. He's a straight shooter. He won't lie to you. He'll deliver on it. And I would just tell people up front, whether I could do it or not. So I never had anything fall through. And so I was suddenly working with almost all these doctors in these two hospitals. And then when I went into wealth management, I completely forgot that success. And then when COVID came down, or just before that, I got referrals from a couple doctors, and I remembered having that specialty as a lender, and it really made things fast because I knew when they would walk in the door, I already knew 90% of their story, and they're very loyal, and it's a microcosm. Doctors only want to talk to other doctors, and I've since learned that they're very active on social media, but not on, not where they're posting cat pictures and stuff. But then for some reason, they've really taken to that. So I came across a doctor, a retired surgeon, Vicki Rackner, and she helps financial advisors target doctors and dentists. So I recently wrote the foreword to her latest edition of a book, 9 Money Mistakes That Doctors Make. So we offer that as a lead generator. And again, she's helped me understand why doctors are different from others, how they're different, and what's the right way to approach them. Mm-hmm. So cold calling isn't going to work, but maybe going to a doctor's convention or offering webinars on healthcare, on telemedicine was an option, or how to different practice management subjects, or writing an article in support of them based on an issue that's coming up for regulation. So just really becoming their advocate. And then once you get to know one, it's, just really promoting the referrals.
Right.
So that's kind of where I am with the doctors and dentists. So I'm just developing that. That was important because there's a lot of snow outside here right now in Pennsylvania. We've had at least 20 inches over the last 3 weeks. And as Danny Glover would say on the Lethal Weapon, I'm getting too old for this stuff. So as my partner and I, my girlfriend and I talk about what are we going to do, we'd really like to become snowbirds and get a place in Florida.
Right.
So there's no Merck facilities down there that I'm aware of. So it really helps me develop a more portable niche.
Right.
So Merck and Company, there's 15,000 around me now, but I don't know how many Merck employees are in Naples, Florida. Right. So that kind of, again, the Steve Moeller approach, what's the life that you want? What's the industry that's going to support that? And who are the perfect clients? Yeah. And from my conversations and mentoring but with Dr. Rackner, it's just a real good niche to get in with some of these people. And especially now after COVID, the orthodontist and the plastic surgeon, they never in a million years thought that they'd be unemployed.
Right.
And she says over 52% of them were do-it-yourselfers. And now it's time for them to get serious. So it's just a good time to get in there because now they're looking for help.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you mentioned the 9 money mistakes that doctors make. Could you share a few of those with us?
Well, one of my favorites is that avoid doctor deals. They're investment stories that just have a great storyline to them, but they're always far-fetched and bogus. I'm a Tony Robbins Platinum partner. So I go to some really high-end conferences with a lot of wealthy people, and the economics conferences in Sun Valley, or at least it was last year. And they brought in a lot of great scientists talking about really cutting-edge stuff, and they were trying to raise money for this really early-stage research based on some little study at Harvard. But I got to tell you, from an investment point, they were really far-fetched ideas, but they were interesting to those with a science background. So it's avoid the doctor deals is probably the biggest mistake that they can make.
Right. The other thing that when I think about doctors too is their financial situation is different, obviously, I think, from someone at Merck or someone who works at Homeland Security. Oftentimes they might need a complicated retirement plan, a money purchase plan, a profit sharing plan, an accelerated DB plan, et cetera. I mean, have you had to become expert in novel pension plans for high net worth?
I had to find experts that could do that for me. So I had to know enough to be able to identify the situations, but I didn't have to become the expert in that. And one of the big issues, two of the big issues is a lot of doctors haven't had a raise in 10 years. With especially in Pennsylvania with the cost of malpractice insurance. a lot of doctors left Pennsylvania to go to Delaware because it was just outrageous because of the lawsuits. And then with HMOs and PPOs, it's not the same thing. One of Dr. Rachter's books is The Myth of the Rich Doctor. That was her most recent book. And I sent that out to a couple of prospects that, I was conversing with. And one of the biggest issue is, what do I do with the debt? How do I approach the debt? Do I focus on it? Do I try to do public service? And a lot of the public service programs to forgive the debt, they're almost bogus. So few people actually get their student loans paid off in those programs. So how to help them identify the best way to deal with their student debt.
Right. And the same I think is true of young dentists who might be in a position or desire to buy an older dentist practice, but they're laden with debt and have no ability to service their debt and buy a practice.
Right. But at the same time, there's so many old dentists retiring where the practice is really worthless without a successor, because you can't get anything for the equipment. So it's helping some of the clients come to realize what are their options for selling their practice. So you can do a roll-up, an integration, an aggregation, but helping them understand the differences. And also, I've talked a lot about ESOPs. And for some of the big practices, that could be great if it's big enough to support something like that.
Right.
But the bank isn't going to finance the acquisition of a dental or medical practice. It's the doctor that's selling it is going to do that. Or if you have a group of doctors, they want to bring some people in. Or what we've seen a lot of in Pennsylvania and Ohio that I know of is a lot of practices selling to the hospitals. So the hospital buys the practice, and then they agree to work for a couple of years as an employee of the practice. So that's been one way that many have been exiting their practice, their medical practice or dental practice.
Right. So we've covered a lot of ground: pharmaceuticals, public servants, doctors. Is there an occupation or an industry that you'd like to pursue next to add to your quiver here?
No, I'm thinking of that one scene from the movie The Big Short, where Steve Carell's talking to the mortgage guy that specialized in strippers. He did a lot of stripper loans. But no, I want nothing to do with strippers. It ruined a lot of people's lives. But I really like where I am now. I've got enough connections, and really with COVID, with bringing in Zoom and telemedicine or telefinancial, consumers are 90% of them are accepting it. And you don't have the geographical limitations that you might have had before. And doing webinars instead of dinner seminars is really just a great opportunity. So I just feel like the world is my oyster. I just wish I was 20 years younger. But I've got the energy. But I just think it's a great time to be in this business. And this is, when I came across Harry Dent and the Great Boom Ahead, and I saw 100 million people looking to get out of debt and retire. That's when I went back to school to get my CFP.
Yeah.
And,
so the Institute, obviously, it offers 3 certifications: the SEMA, the CPWA, and the RMA.
Right.
Speak a little bit about the value of designations with respect to either the credibility that it provides you or the knowledge that it provides you in doing what you do.
They're absolutely essential. If it was just George, stockbroker, I wouldn't be who I am today. But I got the CFP first, and that was the focus was working on all these other financial industries. So at the time I was in banking, but then I went out and I got an insurance license. I started doing taxes and getting experience in all the different areas. And then I got my CFS for mutual funds. Now, that's like a mini CFP, so I didn't gain a lot of knowledge from that, but having an extra 3 initials after my name really helped.
Right.
And then I got the RFC, Registered Financial Consultant. And I'm not trying to sell other designations, but I'm really looking at CIMA and a couple of those other things now for my WI. And if I had to do it over again, I do it that way. I love the fact that you can go to a Yale or a Harvard or University of Chicago and get your credentials and then sit for the test. And I think in addition to the initials after your age, having that Wharton diploma or Booth School of Business or Yale, I think that really gives you a lot of impact. Where I was the old College for Financial Planning, and it just doesn't have the prestige that you would get from a Wharton certificate or Yale. So I think it's a great program. I'm looking at them now. I just had a conversation with a friend in the business yesterday, USCIMA. He doesn't think it's right for me, but the private wealth advisor, I think that's right up my alley. So I'm looking into that program, and I see that Yale offers the education for that. So I may get rid of several initials as a result of this.
Well, I didn't want to twist your arm, but we're awfully proud of the designations that are provided here.
As you should be.
Right. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you'd like to talk about, or anything that we've already talked about that you want to just reemphasize?
Yeah, go over my notes, and again, the difference that makes the difference is knowing the difference. Knowing what you have and finding people that you really like to work with. My fiance, she just loves hanging with my clients, and when we do client events, they're just the nicest people in the world, and it makes all the difference. When there are some people, you work with them and your heart just sinks. And if you're really good at your niche and really honest and show up every day, you can pick who you want to work with. And that was one of the things I got from Steve Moeller. His father was an orthodontist. And he would ask him, Dad, how come you're so successful? Is it because of the equipment, the education? He says, no, I just started working with nicer clients, nicer patients. And I got better and better at that stuff. And that made all the differences, working with people that he liked. Yeah. And that made him financially successful.
I have to say, as I've aged in my life, there are two things that drive me. It's one, working with people I like working with, and working on things that I like working on.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
Yeah. Years ago, I dropped a $10 million Merck executive. He was just disrupting everything, and none of the clients are worth all of the clients. He would always slow with the paperwork, always wanted his call put through right away. I got him out of trouble with the SEC because I had advised him on his company stock and his options. So, when the SEC said, why did you dump all of this stock? Well, George told me to. George called me up and told me to. But he was just always interfering with the practice. I couldn't provide service to the others. And I let him go, and I felt so much better as a result. Yeah. And we replaced him. I fired a client back in March, and I replaced her within a couple of weeks. And much bigger, much nicer people to work with. So only work with people that you like to be with.
Yeah. Well, you followed a time-honored recommendation that some advisors find hard to do, which is to fire clients. So I'm glad to hear that you were able to do that. So.
Yes.
Well, George, I really enjoyed our chat today. I look forward to perhaps having you come back on another podcast, and we'll get a chance to chat more about other things.
That'd be great. I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Advisor podcast, brought to you by the Investments and Wealth Institute. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe through iTunes, Spotify, or our website at www.investmentsandwealth.org/podcast to get the latest episodes of our Exceptional Advisor podcast series. For additional resources, updates on events, and exclusive membership deals, visit www.investmentsandwealth.org.